Orlin Marek wrapped his arms around Celeste in the middle of the crowded gala, his fingers grazing her waist as cameras flashed around them. He didn't notice the stunned silence that followed. He didn't see the guests exchanging uneasy glances. And he certainly didn't realize that just a few feet behind him, watching every second of his betrayal, stood his pregnant wife, Ilyana Marek. Orlin Vanderbilt was the kind of man who commanded attention the moment he walked into a room. Tall, sharp-featured, and exuding confidence, he had built a billion-dollar empire from the ground up. His name was synonymous with wealth, power, and influence. He was a man who had everything: luxury cars, private jets, a sprawling estate, and a wife who was the envy of high society. Ilyana Marek was more than just a beautiful woman. She had once been a celebrated model, gracing the covers of fashion magazines before stepping away from the spotlight to become Orlin's wife. Their love story had been a whirlwind romance, one that captivated the public. She had been swept into his world of extravagance, and for a time, it seemed like a perfect dream. Their wedding had been an international event, covered by media outlets as a fairy tale union of beauty and wealth. The couple was constantly seen at charity galas, red carpet events, and luxury vacations that showcased their seemingly unbreakable bond. Now, after 3 years of marriage, Ilyana was expecting their first child. Her pregnancy was a source of joy, not just for her, but for their fans who followed their lives closely through social media and magazine features. She had always imagined this moment, starting a family with the man she loved, raising their child in the mansion they had designed together. Orlin had been overjoyed when she first told him the news, wrapping her in his arms and promising to be the best father. But as the months passed, something had changed. At first, it was subtle. Orlin's late nights at the office became more frequent. Business trips that once lasted a weekend stretched into weeks. His phone, which he had always left casually on the table, was now locked and rarely out of his sight. When she asked about it, he dismissed her concerns with effortless charm, telling her how demanding his business had become. She wanted to believe him. The first real warning came during a gala event. Ilyana had been glowing that night, her hands resting protectively over her growing belly as she stood beside Orlin, smiling for cameras. But something was off. She noticed how his eyes would drift away during conversations, how his grip on her waist was looser than usual. The warmth he, once displayed so naturally, now felt rehearsed. And then there was the way he excused himself so often, stepping away to take calls, his voice lowering whenever she approached. A seed of doubt began to take root in her mind, but she brushed it aside. After all, she was pregnant, emotional, overthinking everything. At least that's what she told herself. Her unease only grew in the following weeks. One afternoon, as she lay on the couch scrolling through her phone, she came across a tabloid article speculating about Orlin's faithfulness. It was a vague piece, filled with nothing but anonymous sources and blurry photos of him at a private club. She had laughed it off, showing it to him as a joke. He had smiled, taken her hand, and assured her that rumors came with his status. She let it go, but a feeling of discomfort remained. Then there was his scent. When he came home late, there were nights when his cologne was different, softer, unfamiliar. When she mentioned it, he laughed and blamed the new luxury car he had purchased, saying the leather seats must have absorbed the scent of his clients. Despite everything, Ilyana pushed her suspicions aside. She wanted to believe her husband, to trust that their life was as perfect as it appeared. She was about to bring a child into the world, and the last thing she wanted was to let fear and doubt consume her. But deep down, a part of her knew. And soon, she would have no choice but to face the truth. Ilyana had always believed that if something were truly wrong in her marriage, she would sense it. She had convinced herself that she would notice the moment Orlin betrayed her, but the reality was far more painful. His deception had been unfolding, right in front of her, hidden beneath expensive gifts and affectionate words. She had ignored the signs for too long. One morning, she decided she couldn't push away her suspicions any longer. Orlin had been more distant than usual, leaving, early and returning home well past midnight. His excuses felt rehearsed, and his touch no longer held the warmth it once did. She needed answers. She needed proof. Her opportunity came unexpectedly. A charity event was being hosted in Orlin's name at an exclusive venue downtown. It was the kind of gathering she would typically attend with him, but this time he told her to stay home and rest. He had insisted that she shouldn't exhaust herself in her condition. Something about the way he had looked at her when he said it, the quickness of his words, made her uneasy. Ilyana decided to go anyway. Dressed elegantly but discreetly, she arrived at the venue unannounced. The grand hall was filled with powerful figures, all mingling beneath crystal chandeliers. A large digital screen displayed a live feed of the event, capturing the most notable guests. She searched the crowd, looking for Orlin, and then she saw him. He was standing near the bar, a glass of champagne in hand. He looked relaxed, completely at ease. But it wasn't his presence that made her heart stop. It was the woman beside him, Celeste Lorne, young, beautiful, and notorious for her entanglements with married men. She was draped in a sleek black dress, her hand resting lightly on Orlin's arm. Ilyana stood frozen as the live feed captured the moment. Orlin leaned in, whispering something into Celeste's ear, his lips brushing against her hair. Then, without hesitation, he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in an intimate embrace. A murmur spread through the room. Some people turned away awkwardly, pretending not to notice. Others exchanged glances, clearly aware of what was unfolding. The betrayal wasn't just happening in secret, it was being broadcast for all to see. Ilyana's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled as she clutched the small purse she had brought. Every fibre of her being wanted to rush forward, to demand an explanation, to scream at him for humiliating her in such a public way. But she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she backed away, slipping into the shadows, unnoticed in the sea of guests. Her mind raced, her pulse pounded in her ears. The realization hit her with crushing force. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was something deeper, something planned. Orlin had moved on from her long before she had even suspected it. And worse, he hadn't even tried to hide it anymore. He had done this, knowing that the cameras were rolling, knowing that people would talk. He had done this without fear, without guilt. As she stepped outside into the cold night air, her world felt like it was crumbling. She thought about the baby growing inside her, about the future she had imagined for their family. Orlin had shattered all of it in a single moment. Tears threatened to spill down her cheeks, but she forced them back. This wasn't the time for heartbreak. This wasn't the time to fall apart. She had spent years loving him, trusting him, believing in him. Now it was time to make him pay. Ilyana didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, staring at the ceiling as anger and pain twisted inside her. The image of Orlin holding Celeste burned in her mind, replaying over and over like a cruel reminder of how easily he had discarded her. She had given him everything, her love, her trust, a future together, and he had thrown it all away without hesitation. By morning, her sorrow hardened into something else. She wasn't just a betrayed wife. She was a woman who had been humiliated in public, reduced to nothing more than an afterthought in her husband's life. She refused to let him win. Her first move was gathering proof. She couldn't confront Orlin without knowing exactly how deep his betrayal ran. Over the next few days, she became meticulous in her observations. She checked his schedule, noted his absences, and paid close attention to the subtle changes in his behavior. She hired a private investigator, someone discreet, someone who had no ties to Orlin's circle. If there was more to uncover, she needed to know all of it. What she learned in just a few days was worse than she had imagined. Orlin and Celeste had been together for months. Lavish weekend trips disguised as business meetings, hidden properties, under shell companies, expensive gifts that had never been meant for her. The investigator provided photos, receipts, even messages exchanged between the two. Orlin wasn't just having an affair. He was building a future with Celeste, one that didn't include Ilyana or their unborn child. She sat alone in her bedroom, the stack of evidence spread out in front of her. It should have broken her completely. It should have left her feeling powerless, but instead, it fueled something far stronger. She refused to be cast aside like she was nothing. She refused to be the wife who simply accepted her fate. She had seen too many women in her world suffer quietly, allowing their powerful husbands to control the narrative. Divorce settlements that left them with barely enough dignity to walk away. Media stories twisting the truth in the men's favor, painting them as victims of unhappy marriages. She knew exactly how this would end if she did nothing. Orlin would push her out of his life, ensure that she was seen as unstable, unfit to raise his child. He would make himself look like the victim, a man who had no choice but to move on. She couldn't allow that. Her next steps had to be calculated. If Orlin could play the role of a perfect husband in public while living a double life, then so could she. She kept her composure, acted as if nothing had changed. She smiled at him when he came home, asked about his day, pretended to believe his lies. She let him think she was still the devoted, oblivious wife. But behind the scenes, she was planning his downfall. She met with her lawyer in secret, ensuring that when she struck, she would do it in a way that left him with nothing. She gathered financial records, hidden accounts, anything that would expose his web of deceit. And most importantly, she waited for the perfect moment, because Orlin had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated her. And soon, he would learn just how much damage a woman scorned could do. Ilyana had always been a woman of quiet strength, but now she was something else entirely. Every step she took, every word she spoke, was calculated. She moved through her days as if nothing had changed, masking the storm brewing inside her. But behind the scenes, she was setting a trap that Orlin would never see coming. She had gathered enough evidence to destroy him: bank statements, hidden transactions, contracts linking him to offshore accounts, and, most damning of all, photographs of him and Celeste together. Not just at the charity event, but in places that could not be explained away. Luxurious resorts, intimate dinners, a secret penthouse registered under a fake company. He had left a trail, arrogant enough to believe no one would find it. But Ilyana had, and now she would use it against him. She knew Orlin's pride was his greatest weakness. He cared more about his image than anything else. His wealth, his power, the way the world perceived him. Those were the things that mattered most. He had built an empire, crafted a persona that demanded respect. A scandal like this, one that painted him as a cheating billionaire abandoning his pregnant wife, would destroy him. He would fight to keep it hidden at all costs. And that was exactly what she counted on. She started small, planting whispers where they would reach him, a subtle comment at a social event, a carefully timed conversation overheard by the right people. She let the tension build, knowing that rumors had a way of spreading like wildfire. She could see it working. Orlin grew restless, distracted. He was making more phone calls behind closed doors, leaving abruptly for meetings that hadn't been scheduled. But she wasn't done yet. The final blow had to be public. It had to be something he couldn't bury with money or power. She secured a private meeting with one of the most influential journalists in the city, someone who had exposed scandals before, someone who couldn't be bought. She handed over everything: the proof, the names, the timeline. She made sure the story would be airtight, impossible to deny. Then she waited. It happened faster than she expected. The article broke on every major news outlet, the headlines brutal and unforgiving. Billionaire Orlin Marek's secret affair exposed, pregnant wife betrayed in public. The world saw the photos, the receipts, the details of his deception. Social media erupted with outrage. His reputation took a hit so devastating that even his most loyal business partners began to distance themselves. Orlin was caught in a storm of his own making, and there was no escaping it. He stormed into there, home that night, his face red with fury, but Ilyana was ready. She sat calmly, her hands resting over her growing belly, watching as he unraveled. He demanded to know why she had done this, how she could betray him like this. The irony of his words almost made her laugh. She let him rage, let him throw his accusations, but when he finally fell silent, breathing hard, she delivered the final blow. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were divorce papers, drawn up with terms that would leave him with nothing. She had secured every asset she could, taken every legal step to ensure that when she walked away, she would be the one in control. Orlin had spent months living a double life, believing that he could replace her without consequence. Now, he was the one being discarded. Orlin Marek had spent years crafting an untouchable empire, but in a matter of days, everything came crashing down. His betrayal had been exposed to the world, his name dragged through headlines that left no room for redemption. The business world, once his playground, now treated him like a liability. Investors backed out of deals, board members questioned his leadership, and clients hesitated to associate with a man whose personal scandals overshadowed his professional success. Ilyana watched it all unfold from a distance. She had spent years being the perfect wife, standing beside him at events, smiling for cameras, playing the role he expected. But now, she was done. She had given him every chance to be the man he had promised to be. Instead, he had humiliated her in the worst way possible. Now, she had made sure the world saw him for who he truly was. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly. Orlin, desperate to salvage what remained of his reputation, tried to negotiate, but Ilyana was unyielding. Every financial document she had collected, every hidden account, every business dealing he had tried to keep secret was now in the hands of her legal team. She had secured enough leverage to ensure that she and her child would never struggle. With no other options, Orlin was forced to sign away everything. The mansion, the luxury cars, the private jet, assets he had once flaunted as symbols of his power, were now hers. The courts awarded her full custody of their unborn child, citing Orlin's reckless behavior and unstable public image as reasons. He had gone from being a billionaire with the world at his feet to a man scrambling to keep even a fraction of what he had built. Celeste, the woman he had risked everything for, was nowhere to be found. As soon as his downfall began, she disappeared. She had played her role while he was at the top, but now that he was sinking, she had no intention of going down with him. Reports surfaced that she had been seen with another wealthy businessman, already moving on to her next target. Orlin had no one left. Ilyana, however, had everything ahead of her. She stood in front of the grand estate that was once theirs, but now belonged to her alone. She didn't feel sorrow as she looked at the place where her marriage had fallen apart. She felt relief. The world expected her to be broken, but she wasn't. She was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, the weight of a man who had never valued her. The final nail in Orlin's coffin came in the form of a lawsuit. Several former employees came forward with claims of unethical business practices, fraud, and workplace misconduct. Investigations began, and soon the authorities were involved. The same media outlets that had once praised him were now covering his downfall with relentless scrutiny. Ilyana never spoke about Orlin publicly. She didn't need to. The world already knew what he had done, and now he was paying the price. She had no interest in revenge beyond what she had already done. Her only focus was on the future, her child, her life, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. As she placed a hand over her growing belly, she knew one thing for certain. Orlin Marek had underestimated her, and now he had lost everything.